In this video, we're going to set up the user interface, the part that the user interacts with in our mobile app. So here I am. I started a new project in Thunkable, and I'm using Thunkable X. You can tell up here in the URL. I'm using Thunkable X, so if yours looks a little different than mine, that's probably the problem. Go ahead, open up a Thunkable X application. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our sketch. This is my sketch. This is how I want it to look. And if you see, there are 3 rows, and then in our 3rd row, there's 2 columns. And columns and rows help hold our information together like we want it. It helps us organize how things are stacked and arranged, and it helps our responsive design for our web app. And that's so it adjusts to the size of the frame. So what we're going to do is we are going to pull 3 columns over onto our screen here. So I'm going to scroll down a little. Let's see, where is, I want layout, under layout. Here we go. You always lay your rows first. So I'm going to lay 1 row. You see it changed right there. I'm going to bring my 2nd row. Oh, you see how I don't actually see 2 rows? It's my first sign that something's wrong. So I'm going to pull this down a little. Let's see, I guess it won't get bigger until I make it bigger. So you see this row is under row 1. I don't actually want that. I want them to be on the same level. Okay, so I'm going to drag and drop it up, and you see that orange line. That's showing me where it goes. Okay, so now you see they're on the same level in our stacker here, and they both show up there. And in fact, when adding rows, you can also add it just straight up here, okay? So there we go. I have my 1, 2, 3 rows. Now, I'm going to rename them, so I don't care exactly what order they are, but if I did want to change their order, wouldn't do it that way. I would have to do it this way. There we go. So I have my 3 rows. And if we remember, I also had 2 columns in this bottom row. So I'm going to actually pull those columns over. I'm going to pull 1 there. And because we've noticed that problem, we're going to pull it up there. So now I have 2 columns in this row. There we go. Now, if I look back at my sketch, these rows were not all the same size. So let's talk about how we design those rows. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to select this top row. And whatever I select here in this pane is defined over here in the properties. So here I am. I'm going to rename it first of all. We're going to rename this. I'm going to call this title. I'm going to rename them all real quick. I'm going to call this graph because that's where my graph is going to go. And see how this, I actually only selected column 2. So what I actually want to select is this 3rd row. And so the easiest way to just select that 3rd row is by going up here and selecting row 3. And now you see this red dot is all around that area because I want to call that chunk, that row itself, I'm going to call that row for buttons. There we go. Now, these were not all the same size, right? So I'm going to come up here and I want to be able to shrink this. Okay, so I'm going to come, I have it selected here. I'm going to look over here and I'm going to choose height. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose relative size. And relative means in relation to the size of the screen of the phone, I want that section to be this % of it. And we use relative size versus hard coding pixels because we may be designing for any number of devices across a range of sizes. And if we do things relative, then we can have responsive design in our web app, and our design will shrink and grow as it needs to for the user's device. So that's how it works in web, and that's how it works in mobile design. So I'm going to come here. I chose relative size, and I have to admit, when I was a little confused when I first started in Thunkable because it's not obvious at first where you'd put the number of your relative size. You actually X out of what you saw right there, right? That was you X out of there. Wait, hold on. So I want to choose relative size, and here is where I get to enter. So let's see what 15% looks like. That might be a little much. Let's try 10. That looks good to me. Now, the other thing up here is I don't really want it to say title. I really want it to have the name of my app. So I'm going to actually do that by adding a label. That's how we do that. So I'm going to scroll up here. Labels are one of the first things we see. I'm going to drag and drop a label, and I can drag it here onto this, onto my screen, or I can drag it onto this tree. When I have my label right there, I can come over here to the properties on the right, and I'm going to call this greenhouse monitor. There we go. And if I wanted to, I could change my font size, my font, my styles, my colors. But right now, I'm just going to give my basics. All right, so when I look down here, I've got my 2 columns, and I want to change the height of this row. And to do that, I need to come up here. I need to select the row itself. And this can kind of trip you up when you work with block coding. It seems like it's so simple, but you really have to make sure that the piece you want is highlighted. And I don't want just the column. I want the row itself. Now I'm going to choose the height. I'm going to come here. I'm going to go to relative size, X out a fill container, and instead, let's say 30%. Okay, that's probably what I had before. Let's say 35%. That seems pretty good. Now, for me right now, it's a guess, and I can always go back and change it, but it helps me a little bit. So now I'm down here. I am in column 2. Now, column 2, if I look at my sketch, this is where my text input boxes go. So and this just has column 1, just has one single button. So this column 2 could be wider. So for that, I'm going to go up to width. Okay, so I'm going to choose the relative size, X out of that, and I'm going to say I wanted it more than 50%. So let's see what 60% looks like. Oh, no, maybe even, could I go up to 70? Maybe not. Let's do 65. Okay. So here I have a column for my text inputs and a column for my button. Now, a text input is where the user gets to type into it. So that's what the difference is between that and a text box, right? The user enters things into it. So I'm going to drag and drop this in, and I want 3 of them according to my design. 1, 2, 3. And I want one button right here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add my button. All right. Now, first of all, buttons don't really say button. Buttons say what they want to do. And as per my sketch, this is going to say add. Now, I don't like how these are spaced. So I want to change that. And so when we're talking about spacing, again, it's in the properties along the side here, but we're going to go down, and actually, I'm not really spacing these individually. This is a spacing issue for the column itself, okay? So when I select the column up here, or the column here, as shown by that red box, I'm going to then look down, and I am looking for vertical alignment, okay? So these are my options. I could do the top. That's a little scrunched. Bottom, you probably know where that's going to go. Space in between gives me that, but I actually kind of want space around. And that gives me some padding all around. I like how that looks. It feels like there's enough space for my users to see the 3 distinct things I want them to enter. Now, text inputs have hints in them, right? So I'm going to select my text input. I'm going to come up here, and up here it's going to let me do the hint. Now, my hint, this is so the user enters the information I want to track. We're going to do low on that one. It's for my low temp. I'm going to do my second one is going to be my high. And my third one is going to be notes. Okay. So now I have an app that has the basic structure. This is my user interface. I've got my title, I've got my spaces laid out. And when it comes to now we're going to be able to add some design elements to give ourselves some color to look at. And then we're going to go on and create the code in the block section. But before you go on, stop, give yourself some time, make yourself your user interface, play around with it, find some things, make some mistakes. That's how you learn. And then join me for the next video on how to use material.io to create a color palette for your app.